Theirs was a story of second chances.
They had gone to high school together, and they circled back later and established a relationship.
He was just really, really friendly and sweet.
She was just a beautiful person, inside out.
They went from friends to lovers.
But their flame was extinguished the moment one of them disappeared in the city of brotherly love.
There were prayer vigils and rallies being held throughout the city.
I'm not gonna let it go until I can find out where my daughter's at.
Nobody knew who would have wanted to harm her, and that's what made it such a mystery.
As days turned into weeks, loved ones began to fear the worst, while investigators uncovered one dark secret after the next.
My reaction to both pregnancies was like, man, how did you get yourself into this situation?
They begin to suspect that this is a homicide.
But to stop this roller coaster ride of emotions, detectives would have to spring a trap, one seemingly fit for a blockbuster spy movie.
It was something out of a Hollywood film. I mean, it was that exciting and that dramatic. The lights come on, the sirens come on, and you talk about somebody being caught red-handed.
Monday, July 18, 2005, West Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's 6 p.m., and workers at a local daycare are waiting on one last parent, pregnant 24-year-old Latoya Figueroa, to pick up her daughter, Aisha.
Hi, Latoya. It's Shelly from Aisha's daycare. I was just calling to make sure that you're still going to come pick her up today.
She didn't pick up her daughter that night for daycare. Even at 6 months pregnant, just leaving her. No way. There's no way. It's not even in her physical being to be like that.
Hi, is this Antoine Jenkins?
She took pride in being a mom.
Aisha's not been picked up yet today, and I can't get in touch with her mother. Do you think there's any way that you'd be able to come pick her up?
If she couldn't pick her daughter up, she would have made arrangements for someone else to pick her up.
Fortunately, her father was an emergency contact, so they contacted the father, and he picked his daughter up. He was really concerned.
Toya, why didn't you show up? Aisha can spend the night with me, but give me a call when you can.
Hours later, Antoine still hasn't heard from Latoya. She's also a no-show at the apartment she shares with her uncle.
It's so not in her character. It's so not Latoya. Instantly, you're like, something's wrong. Something happened.
Latoya's family tries desperately to reach her, but their calls go unanswered. So they start reaching out to her closest friends, including Latoya's current boyfriend, Stephen Poche.
Hello? She was 5 or 6 months pregnant, and he was the father.
I was calling to see if you'd heard from Latoya over the last few days.
I seen her yesterday. We went to a doctor's appointment. What's up?
She didn't come home, and she didn't pick up Aisha from daycare yesterday, and that's just not like her.
What? Tell me what's going on.
Stephen was extremely concerned about not only her welfare and well-being, but the well-being of this unborn child.
Despite their best efforts to find Latoya, another day passes with no sign of her. On July 21st, her family files a missing persons report with the Philadelphia Police Department.
Latoya's family let the authorities know right away, this is unlike Latoya. So they really believe that something's wrong.
People were thinking, what could have happened to Latoya? Was she in a hospital somewhere and no one could identify her? Did someone snatch her? And was she still alive? It's a huge mystery.
A mystery that was about to become a rallying cry for a city. One rippling with unspeakable deceit and tangled lies that all culminates in a heart-stopping showdown. Born and raised in West Philadelphia, Latoya Figueroa was a little girl with a big heart.
Latoya would give her shirt off her back for the next person to help them out. Would truly look out for a person without even knowing them.
She was a hard worker. She had a dream of being a nurse.
She put herself on a path to succeed, and she was determined that she wasn't going to let anything stop her.
By the time LaToya reached high school, she had blossomed into a bright and beautiful young woman.
She's like 4'11", maybe 115 pounds, soaking wet. Just little and petite. A beautiful person, inside, out.
When she was just 16, LaToya fell head over heels for a classmate at West Philly High, Antoine Jenkins.
Antoine and Toya, when they first got together, they were very young. They loved each other. They really, really did.
A year later, LaToya became pregnant. Thrilled to become a mother, she and Antoine named their baby girl Aisha.
She was very responsible, very good caretaker, very interested in loving and nurturing her daughter, an involved parent.
She loved being a mom, and she was a great mom.
The love for their child wasn't enough to keep LaToya and Antoine together as a couple. After graduating high school in 1999, the two parted ways.
I believe it was a good relationship. I think that they both were just too young.
But raising a daughter on her own meant LaToya had to make sacrifices, and that meant putting her dreams of nursing school on hold.
She had 3 jobs, and one was a hostess. She worked at a marketing research firm. I mean, so driven, so determined to make sure that her daughter wanted for nothing.
As much as LaToya adored her daughter, at 23, the young woman with a shining smile and killer figure still craved something else.
She wanted to love again. She wanted to share her life with somebody.
As fate would have it, one day in late 2004, she unexpectedly bumped into an old friend.
Toya?
Steven?
Steven had worked at a local oil company, but he had known LaToya since high school.
He was just really, really friendly and sweet.
Look at you. You look good.
You look good yourself, though.
You think?
Trust me, I know.
Toya was pretty, so I think he was attracted to her. Now, her being attracted to him, I can honestly say he's one of the few good guys.
So you should definitely hit me up.
I'd love that. What's your number?
They started off as friends, very good friends. They were both funny, goofy, laid-back type of people.
It wasn't long before the pair's friendship blossomed into something more.
Somewhere along the line, it became an intimate situation, whereas though they went from friends to lovers.
This is good. Like, I love it. Really good.
He was sweet and romantic. He's the type of guy that holds the car door open, buys the flowers, stuff like that.
For LaToya, being with Steven was just easy. Steven was great with Aisha, and that meant the world to LaToya.
A fact that soon became even more important after LaToya broke some news to Steven.
I'm pregnant.
Really?
Yeah.
That February, a few months later, after they reconnected, LaToya found out that she was pregnant.
She was ecstatic. She was totally overjoyed.
Steven was a little shocked when he found out that Toya was pregnant, but he was happy about it. He named the baby and everything.
With Steven's love and support, LaToya's future had never seemed more promising.
She had a beautiful daughter, another child on the way, and a man in her life who loved her. Life was good, and it seemed like it was only going to get better.
But on July 18th, 2005, the life Steven and LaToya were building together comes crashing down. That day, LaToya Figueroa disappears without a trace.
She's literally vanished.
Someone who typically stays connected to their family to go missing and just vanish, that's a huge red flag that something has gone wrong.
In July of 2005, LaToya Figueroa's life seemed blessed in so many ways. Already the proud mother of a 7-year-old daughter, LaToya was now 5 months pregnant with a second child, all thanks to a rekindled relationship with high school friend turned lover, Steven Poche.
They were friends first, and when they became lovers, I was just like, who really doesn't want to fall in love with a friend?
But on Monday, July 18th, after a routine prenatal visit, LaToya failed to pick up her daughter at daycare, triggering alarm bells for her family and friends.
They were hoping for the best, but also thinking of the worst, trying to put whatever clues they had together, piece together some type of story or scenario for what could have happened.
Now, 48 hours after LaToya's disappearance, her friends and family are doing everything they can to find her.
They were placing pamphlets and brochures and pictures of her all around the city of Philadelphia.
Meanwhile, Philadelphia police are ramping up their search efforts as well. They've started by looking at one of the people closest to LaToya.
When you have a case like LaToya's, it was a natural instinct for the police officers to turn to Stephen Poche because he was the last person that was known to be with her.
When was the last time you saw LaToya?
The last time I saw LaToya was July 18th. Yeah, she had a prenatal appointment that morning, and she wanted me to go with her.
Stephen Poche says that they went to a doctor's appointment, they went to get something to eat, they went to his apartment, she left, and he didn't see her again after that.
How was she feeling? Was everything okay?
Everything was fine. I mean, she wanted to go shopping for the baby, so I mean, I went to the bank and got out $300.
What time did she leave the house here?
5 o'clock. She had to go pick up Aisha from daycare, yeah.
Emotionally, Stephen was a wreck for multiple reasons because, one, she was pregnant with his child. No one knew where she was at.
Stephen appears genuinely concerned, and when detectives follow up on his story, it checks out.
Stephen's bank records show a withdrawal from that afternoon for around $300. And a neighbor claimed that they saw LaToya walking around 5 p.m. near Stephen's apartment.
Stephen agreed to let the police department search his home. There was no DNA, no hair, no blood, nothing to indicate that any foul play had happened at the house.
But before detectives leave, Stephen drops a bombshell. One that suggests his relationship with LaToya wasn't as seamless as it appeared.
He brings in the possibility of her having other relationships with other men.
He mentions that there's a person that's giving her flowers. He mentions that there's a person that works at the Friday's restaurant. Then he also mentions the fact that she has this previous boyfriend who she has a child with.
Could one of these men be involved in LaToya's disappearance? Stephen isn't sure, but he claims LaToya might well have had beef with her ex, daughter Aisha's father, Antoine Jenkins.
He mentioned to police that Antoine was spending more time with his new wife and her kids versus spending time with, her daughter, and LaToya had a real problem with that.
Just for some of the things Toya said herself, like she would have these fiery arguments with the father of her kid, and it was a time where he did struck her.
If the allegations are true, detectives know they need to find Antoine immediately.
It doesn't take them long to find Antoine because he was with LaToya's family, putting up flyers, talking to neighbors, seemingly doing everything in his power to help try to find her.
My partner and I are investigating LaToya's disappearance, and we'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind.
Investigators begin by asking Antoine about his relationship with LaToya.
We know y'all have had some problems in the past, and that they might have been about your daughter. Is that true?
Yes. LaToya, she's an amazing mom. She always wanted what was best for our daughter. Sure, we had the occasional fights, but it was never serious.
Because of his sincerity, the police officers kind of ruled him out. He seems to be sincerely concerned about her welfare.
After hitting another dead end, frustrated detectives are finding few leads.
Police officers weren't able to find any activity in her bank accounts, any calls being made from her cell phone, or anything of that nature.
However, LaToya's family refuses to give up hope.
Her father, Melvin Figueroa, a trooper. I mean, this gentleman would not let the story die. He began to pester the media. He pestered the police. He pestered everybody until the story was told.
I got to stick by my daughter's side. I can't turn my back on her.
To help drum up publicity, Melvin Figueroa calls in the help of a prominent local relative, his cousin, Philadelphia City Councilman Juan Ramos.
The city, particularly our police department, is doing everything that they can.
Ramos sets up a hotline, establishes a reward, and helps turn the search for LaToya into a citywide campaign.
The only thing we can do when someone is lost is go look for them, and that's all we're doing at this time in Franks.
It's supposed to be the city of brotherly love. You know, if it's love out there, just please share it with us. That's all I have to say right now.
The publicity pays off, and the city bonds with one common goal: to find LaToya Figueroa.
Everyone's on board, the family's searching, the city gives supports. Everyone is doing everything they can to help find LaToya.
Dozens more leads pour in, but unfortunately, none yield any credible evidence as to LaToya's whereabouts. Then on August 16th, a police team makes a shocking discovery in the Brewery Town section of Philadelphia, 5 miles away from where LaToya was last sighted.
They found a badly decomposed body of an African-American woman.
You're still hoping for the best, but in your inside, you're like, there's just no way. Your hopes is starting to be overshadowed by the doubts and, you know, your fears. She may not be coming back.
It's been nearly a month since 24-year-old single mother LaToya Figueroa vanished from the streets of Philadelphia. 5 months pregnant with her second child, LaToya's plight has gripped the community and left her loved ones devastated.
Very disturbing, very like a limbo type feeling. You really don't know how to feel. You know, you're still hoping for the best.
On August 16th, police find a badly decomposed female corpse 5 miles from the West Philly street where LaToya was last spotted, causing the hopes of the community to plummet.
Everyone was terrified this could be LaToya. As soon as the family heard about the discovery, they rushed to the scene.
After securing the crime scene perimeter, investigators take a look at their victim.
All right, how long do you think it'll take to get an autopsy going?
About 24 to 48 hours.
24, 48 hours?
When the official report reaches investigators, the findings are conclusive.
It was not LaToya because of the physical characteristics of this woman.
Their Jane Doe had short hair, whereas LaToya's hair was long. And most importantly, the victim was obviously not 5 months pregnant.
Although LaToya's friends and family breathe a sigh of relief when they hear the news, the fact remains. Police are still no closer to finding LaToya.
There's also some frustration in this case because there are really not a lot of physical clues. She just vanished.
She didn't seem to have any enemies, and there was no reason anyone would want to hurt her.
That is, until detectives come across a police report filed on April 28, 2005, 3 months prior to her disappearance.
LaToya Figueroa is coming home from work, and a woman approaches her from behind, throws her to the ground, kicks her in the stomach, takes her pocketbook, and then jumps in a car with a black male, and they drive away.
According to the incident report, LaToya was over 2 months pregnant at the time.
She was rushed to the ER, and thank goodness her and the baby were okay.
At the time, it was thought to be an unrelated robbery attempt, but in retrospect, police started to wonder if this woman could have possibly been connected somehow to Miss Figueroa's disappearance.
While detectives try to ascertain the identity of LaToya's two assailants, authorities in Philadelphia are beginning to suspect the worst.
LaToya still isn't found, and so at that point, the worst is assumed. She was responsible, she was dependable, didn't seem like the type of individual that would just take off and not notify her family or friends of her whereabouts, particularly when her child would be left alone without provision.
The police begin to suspect that this is a homicide, and they begin to investigate it as that. The only problem is they don't have a body.
But handing the case over to the homicide unit could be the kickstarter this investigation needs.
You know, if you classify it as a homicide investigation, you get the best investigators, the best detective team, presumably, you know, all working on this case.
For the new team of investigators, that means leaving no stone unturned. However, before detectives wade too deep into the murky waters of LaToya's case, they receive a startling call from her cousin, Curtisha Davis.
Detective Jones.
The subject matter, Stephen Poche.
The police receive a tip that there's another woman that Stephen Poche was dealing with.
She was like a high school sweetheart of his. Yeah, he was head over heels for her.
But that's not all.
She was pregnant at the same time as Miss Figueroa.
According to Kertisha, the other woman's name is Lena Thompson.
They were always friends. It'd be an off and on thing with them. With him and Lena, it was like they just stopped for a few, took this long break. And then it was like, oh, well, I'm talking back to her.
Kertisha says that even before Lena or LaToya became pregnant, there was no love lost between the two women.
Lena, you need to leave. I've been telling you about talking to her. Lena, you need to leave.
What are you doing here?
Lena, you need to leave. I told you about talking to her. I told you this was my man. We've talked about this.
Get out of here.
You get out of here. Get your car and keep going.
Anybody that knew him knew who Lena was. They did not like each other. They had words, and it wasn't good words.
How many times I have to tell you, Stephen? I don't want you dealing with her. I don't want you dealing with her.
Stephen, though, apparently navigated between the two women with the smooth composure of a diplomat.
He did not like that confrontational stuff. He didn't want it to be them bumping heads. So that's pretty much what it was about. Just like, look, let's squash it.
That plan worked until Lena and LaToya each came to Stephen with their own surprise announcements.
Stephen was shocked when he found out that both girls were pregnant.
Detectives pressed Kertisha for more details on this shocking new lead.
It wasn't like he was trying to get both girls pregnant at the same time. And I know that sounds crazy because it's like, use a condom. However, he loved both girls. He just didn't want to like hurt them.
So here he is trying to juggle these two pregnancies, and everybody's like, wow, this really changes the focus of the case.
Namely, it means police have a potential new suspect in LaToya's disappearance.
The fact he had this other woman pregnant, is she upset that Stephen has two people pregnant at the same time? Could she be a possible doer in this crime?
Not to mention how this revelation paints the man at the center of this torrid love triangle in an entirely different light.
That raises red flags. You also have another girl pregnant. That's not good. That's going to make any detective suspicious.
But before investigators sit down with Stephen Poche a second time, they first want to talk to the other woman vying for his affections. And what she's about to say would quash any doubts as to who was the victor in this jilted game of hearts.
The situation was a ticking time bomb. It was about to explode, and someone was going to get hurt in the fallout.
As the search for missing 24-year-old mother, LaToya Figueroa, reaches the end of its first month, detectives have discovered that the father of LaToya's unborn child, Stephen Poche, is involved in not one, but two steamy relationships.
He is stuck between a relationship with two women he has pregnant at the same time.
Stephen responded to them both being pregnant like any guy would, like, oh, what did I just do?
Naturally, investigators are curious if this development had any bearing on LaToya's disappearance. So they sit down with Stephen's other love interest, Lena Thompson.
Listen, we know that Stephen Poche is the father of your child and LaToya's. That must have made you upset.
I just wanted Stephen to be happy.
Did you have anything to do with her disappearance?
No.
What did you do when you found that LaToya was pregnant with his child too?
Stephen didn't even want that baby. He wanted LaToya to have an abortion.
There's this phone conversation that happens between LaToya, the girlfriend, and Stephen, where the girlfriend and Stephen are asking LaToya to get an abortion. And she says no, that is not something that she would be willing to do. And so for Stephen, I could imagine that he was feeling like he was losing control.
Police know that when a situation like this one spirals out of control, bad things can happen. Detectives can't help but wonder if LaToya's street robbery 4 months earlier wasn't as random as it first appeared.
There were rumors that there was a guy who had some females attack LaToya, made it look like a robbery, and that this was going to be a kind of on-street abortion by beating her in the stomach to the point where she miscarries.
Now, you and Stephen wouldn't have had anything to do with that attack, would you? Seems like a pretty good way to get rid of a baby, huh?
That's crazy. Like, I had nothing to do with that. I swear.
The rumors of the attack were just that, rumors. Nothing the police found directly tied Lena or Stephen directly to the attack. Lena's alibi on the day of LaToya's disappearance checked out, so they had to let her go.
But investigators still have a few questions for Stephen, so they sit down with him for a second time.
Why didn't you tell us about Lena's pregnancy?
Because it had nothing to do with this.
Really? Asking LaToya to have an abortion had nothing to do with her or her disappearance?
I didn't ask her to have an abortion. Who said that? She disappears all the time. She does this thing all the time.
This is what she did when she got mad. She shut everybody out, and I don't know if she would like leave town or whatever the situation may be, but she was shut down and she was just like not want to be bothered with anybody.
However, those who know LaToya best say that she would never do anything of the kind.
I never thought that LaToya had taken off. Her whole life was her daughter. So to believe that she would just leave her like that, never.
There's something about his mannerisms, his gestures, the story he's telling. The police officers are suspicious.
And detectives aren't the only ones who have become suspicious about Stephen's story in the month following LaToya's disappearance.
We just feel as though he knows something because he was the last person to see her.
LaToya's family really believed he had something to do with her disappearance. They just couldn't prove it.
Through it all, Stephen continues to proclaim his innocence.
I didn't murder anybody. Why are you not listening to me?
Emotionally, Stephen was a wreck. He was like, yo, why are her family members and stuff blaming me? Not only was he being blamed, but he was being targeted.
But without any physical evidence linking Poche to LaToya's disappearance, there's nothing anyone can do.
Okay, so do you have anything on me? Because if you don't have anything on me, I'm ready to go.
They interrogated him for hours on end. He was able to be let go because they had no proof he was showing any foul play in the whole ordeal.
If you don't have the body, you can't have a murder.
That is until an unlikely witness steps forward with a chilling story. A story that may just finally reveal what happened to LaToya Figueroa.
An informant contacts the Philadelphia Police Department and tells him that a man calls him, wants him to get a van, a shovel, and of all things, a body bag.
Four weeks after LaToya Figueroa mysteriously disappeared, the Philadelphia Police Department receives a shocking call that will change the course of this investigation.
The Philadelphia Police Department receives a tip from a concerned citizen that an individual that he knew had contacted him about getting his hands on a body bag.
Why else would somebody want a body bag if they weren't intending to put a body in it?
According to the tipster, William Mason, he believes the body could be that of LaToya.
Obviously, that got the attention of the detectives right away, and so too did the identity of Mason's friend. It was Stephen Poche.
Stephen Poche had contacted him about getting his hands on a truck, a body bag, shovels, and was interested in hiding or burying a body.
However, investigators are initially suspicious. For starters, William Mason has a criminal record.
Not only did Mason have a record, but police had already searched Poche's home, and there was no evidence to indicate that a crime had taken place there.
Even while they're feeling skeptical about the tip, there's a sense of desperation because at this point, LaToya's been missing for a month. They were running out of any other credible leads.
But there's still one thing missing from William Mason's story: a body. So investigators hatch a plan of their own.
They have the informant contact Stephen Poche to let him know that he got the items that he wanted them to get.
The cops say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you a van, we'll give you some stuff, and we'll send you down there with him.
The police were going to set a trap. They're going to follow this informant, and they're going to trap them.
On the night of August 19th, 2005, Mason arranges to meet Stephen at a vacant lot in Chester, Pennsylvania, 15 miles southwest of Philadelphia.
Hey, man, what took so long?
Chester is like a rural area outside of Philadelphia. If you're going to hide a body or dump a body, you'd be more inclined to do it in Chester County, thinking that no one would ever find it. He's in his vehicle. The friend who's supposed to help him move the body is in that separate vehicle. But little does Stephen know that friend has some type of GPS connection to the police. So they're following Stephen and the friend.
The police follow them down to Chester. They see Stephen Poche go into this field on 4th Street, go through a hole in the fence.
Man, this place creeps me out. What you doing, man? Hand me a soap. Hand me a...
But as Stephen starts to dig, law enforcement's surveillance team notes something troubling.
Stephen had 2 .45s and a bulletproof vest on.
They find that he's armed, and they find that he is apparently ready to do harm to someone, and perhaps even the person who helped him to move that body.
Fearful that William Mason could be the next victim, officers move in.
As Stephen is about to take the body out, the lights come on, the sirens come on, and you talk about somebody being caught red-handed.
Suspect has fled the scene. All officers be advised. Suspect is armed and dangerous.
Philly police apprehended Stephen at the scene and took him into custody without a shot being fired.
With Stephen Poche now safely in custody, a team of officers searches the surrounding area and soon finds what's left of LaToya's remains.
When they found her body, it was badly decomposed, but then she has these tattoos on her back, and they're able to identify her. And then they find these fetal bones with the body, just heartbreaking.
She had been in a trash bag for 30 days in 100+ degree weather, and she had went from 130 pounds to 30 pounds when they found her. Very devastating.
The Delaware County coroner examines the body, and they find that the cause of death is asphyxiation.
For friends and family, it's a devastating turn of events. But after over a month of anguish, any answer is better than the agony of the unknown.
Probably one of the hardest things that a police officer has to do is to tell a loved one that they have discovered, found that the person that they've been looking for all this time is in fact dead.
It was relief. It was relief as far as you don't want to be in that limbo area anymore. I'm not wondering if it's this way or if it's that way.
But if Stephen Poche hadn't panicked and led police to the body, there's a good chance he may have never been caught.
There was no evidence in his home that there was a struggle or if that she was there. He cleaned up behind himself pretty well.
Nevertheless, Stephen did make the mistake of trying to move LaToya's body. And when he's taken into custody, he makes a shocking confession.
It was all an accident. I didn't mean to kill her.
Stephen is arrested and gives a statement to the detectives that he killed her, that it was an accident in response to a fight that they were having.
Stephen puts this all on LaToya. He claims that during an argument over the other girlfriend and the fact that she's pregnant, that LaToya gets agitated and attacks him. And he trying to restrain her.
Poche says she's hitting him, and he grabs her by the neck in order to get her to stop hitting him, that he just held on too long, and that once she stopped him moving after that, he just panicked.
Oh my gosh, baby. Baby, are you okay? Babe, wake up, please.
Regardless of Stephen's story, that evening, detectives charge him with LaToya's murder and the death of their unborn child, a charge that potentially carries the death penalty in the state of Pennsylvania.
I don't really believe in hate per se, but hate would definitely be a close word to explaining how I felt. To dip him in boiling hot water, that would be too easy for him.
But would the city of brotherly love feel the same way after they hear Stephen's story play out in the courtroom? It's a question everyone's about to find out.
We have a situation where Stephen Poche didn't shoot LaToya Figueroa, didn't stab her, choked her to death, but that's manslaughter, not murder.
On August 26, 2005, the body of 24-year-old expectant mother LaToya Figueroa is finally laid to rest. Those who file in to mourn the loss are still trying to cope with the shocking reality that LaToya died at the hands of her unborn child's father, Stephen Poche.
This was a heinous crime. Stephen Poche was charged with killing LaToya and their unborn child.
They literally court him in the process of moving her body. And just the evilness that's with him, anger, could not even express or explain how I felt at that moment.
The community response was, of course, outrage.
Charged with first-degree murder, Stephen faces the death penalty if convicted. His defense team fears the community's animosity can make getting a fair shake next to impossible. So in the final hours before the trial, they make a bold move.
This was a death penalty case. So we know that we had to work out any deal we could have to avoid him being executed. And that's why at the very last minute, the 11th hour, the Commonwealth agreed that if he requested a judge trial instead of a jury trial, they would take death off the table and he'd be facing life in prison.
As far as prosecutors are concerned, that's as much leniency as Stephen Poche deserves. In opening arguments, they assert LaToya's death was the result of Stephen's selfish and senseless actions.
He had another girl pregnant, was moving in with her. He didn't care about LaToya and his other child. And all he could see is trying to figure out how to get rid of this so that he can think he could be happy with this other girl and his other baby.
He told her, you have to abort this because otherwise they're going to destroy everything I'm trying to do. She refused to do that.
For the prosecution, Stephen had a clear motive. The easiest way out of this predicament was to get rid of LaToya once and for all.
LaToya Figueroa was beginning to be a strain on his other relationship. And so I think when he looked at the possibility of this child coming along, it was a commitment he was not willing to take.
It's the state's contention that following LaToya's prenatal appointment on July 18th, both she and Stephen returned to his apartment where he began his premeditated attack.
You have to see this, I do!
Following the murder, he cleaned up the scene. He wrapped LaToya's body in plastic bags and dumped her in a vacant lot in Chester, Pennsylvania. And he did everything he could to make it look like he had nothing to do with the crime.
And it's about a month later, when the heat really gets turned up on Poche, that prosecutors believe that he had concocted a plan to kill William Mason and frame him for the crime.
It was just a sick and unbelievable story all the way around.
The prosecutor's office was really focused on the fact that Mr. Poche had two young ladies pregnant at the same time, and he was the last person with her. They had this tip from William, and of course, the icing on the cake was a confession or the statement from Stephen.
But it's Stephen's very statement to police that's the crux of his defense team's case.
We don't want to hide his confession. We want to show his confession front and center because it proves exactly what we've been saying from day one. This was voluntary manslaughter, sudden and intense passion, and his confession shows that.
First-degree murder carries a much higher penalty than a manslaughter type of killing, where it's really a killing of circumstance.
Clearly, it wasn't premeditated. Clearly, it wasn't intentional. He freaked out, he choked her, and pressed too hard.
It's an assertion that many courtroom observers find hard to believe.
A person is going to be reacting, right? They're going to be flailing. Their face is going to probably be changing color. It's hard to accidentally choke somebody to death.
Was LaToya's death an accident or murder? Unlike most trials, the answer to that question is solely up to the presiding judge to decide. On October 17, 2006, after 7 days of testimony, he hands down his verdict.
The judge found Stephen guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for LaToya Figueroa and 1 for her unborn child.
At the end of this, satisfaction was felt by the entire Philadelphia community.
The outcome of the case basically gives closure to the family, to the city, to those who were concerned about this missing young woman. The city can move on, the family can move on and begin healing.
Stephen Poche is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for LaToya's devastated friends and family, the sentencing is no substitute for their loss or the grief they still feel because of one man's self-serving actions.
For a person to be so selfish and so senseless, to rob us of her, rob us of her beauty, of her presence. At the end of the day, God is the judge, and he's judging him. He's going to judge him. He's got to answer for what he's done.
This case involving Stephen Poche and LaToya Figueroa, a tragedy all around. Stephen Poche is still alive. His family can come to see him anytime they want in jail. But LaToya Figueroa, the family, the best thing that they can do is to go to the cemetery. So although it's a tragedy all around, it's by leaps and bounds much more of a tragedy for the family of LaToya Figueroa.
The Survivor's Heart, a Houston story. Chapter 1, The Bundt Cake Gambit. The Houston humidity hung heavy over the suburbs, a thick, invisible wool blanket that made every breath feel like a deliberate act of will. Inside the Hart household, however, the air was crisp, conditioned to a sharp coolness that matched the temperament of its matriarch. Reba Hart stood in her kitchen, her hands moving with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had spent 20 years turning chaos into order. She was preparing for a real estate mixer, a business gathering, she told herself, but, in reality, it was a performance. In the competitive world of Houston property, your home was your resume, and your sanity was your secret weapon. A sudden, rhythmic thumping at the back door announced the arrival of the one person who could disturb Reba's equilibrium with a single syllable. "You, Reba, it's me." Barbara Jean entered without waiting for an invitation, carrying a heavy ceramic platter like a sacred offering. She was a whirlwind of pastel polyester and misplaced enthusiasm. "I made you a bundt cake for your party tonight," Barbara Jean chirped, setting the cake down on the granite island with a definitive clack. "The Germans call it bundt." "Oh, those funny Germans." Reba paused, a stack of cocktail napkins in her hand. She looked at the cake, then at the woman who had once been the other woman, and was now, through some cruel twist of cosmic irony, her closest confidant. "Barbara Jean, it's a beautiful cake, truly, but what time should I be here tonight?" Barbara Jean's smile faltered, just for a second. "Well, I assumed." "The cake can stay," Reba interrupted, her voice a blend of southern hospitality and ironclad boundaries. "But you gotta go. This party is business, BJ. As in, none of yours." "Yes, but like so many things, I've made it my business." Barbara Jean beamed, recovered and undeterred. "I've even prepared a speech to give to your clients. It's about the importance of a hearth and a home, and how you, Reba, are the hearth fire of this community." Reba closed her eyes for a brief moment, offering a silent prayer for patience. She knew Reba wasn't just the best real estate agent in town. She was a survivor. But surviving Barbara Jean required a specific kind of internal fortitude. "I do not know what I would do without her," Reba muttered under her breath, a phrase that was both a sincere acknowledgement of friendship and a cry for help. Sometimes, Reba lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling fan's rhythmic rotation, thanking God for the mess her life had become. It was a strange gratitude. She thanked God that Brock, the father of her children, had made a pass at the dental hygienist, who was now standing in her kitchen. If he hadn't, Reba might still be trapped in a lie of a marriage. Instead, she was here. She was whole. She was tired, but she was herself. "I bet God really loves to hear from you," Barbara Jean quipped, sensing Reba's internal monologue. The back door creaked again, and Cheyenne walked in. At 20, Cheyenne carried the weight of the world with a fragile grace. She looked tired, her eyes slightly shadowed, but there was a new clarity in her gaze that hadn't been there a month ago. "Hey, honey," Reba said, her voice softening instantly. "How was your 12-step meeting?" Cheyenne winced. Mom, those meetings are anonymous. You're not supposed to talk about them like they're PTA meetings." "Oh, no, Barbara Jean chimed in, leaning over the bundt cake. "I can talk about my meetings. They're going really well. I mean, like, really, well, I don't know why, but I just don't feel the need to drink at all." Cheyenne sighed, dropping her purse on the table. "I'm glad for you, BJ. So, how was your day?" Reba asked, reaching for her daughter's hand. But as she moved, Her eyes caught something in Cheyenne's pocket, a familiar, rectangular bulge. Before Cheyenne could react, Reba's hand flashed out. "Give me that." "Mom, what do you think you're doing?" Reba held the pack of cigarettes up like a piece of evidence in a capital murder trial. "I'm protecting you. Since when do you smoke?" "I'm smoking now," Cheyenne snapped, her voice rising in defense. "Look, it's no big deal. I'll quit before it affects my looks." "I'm a little more worried about your health, Cheyenne," Reba said, her heart hammering against her ribs, "and the health of everybody around you." "Well, almost everyone," Barbara Jean whispered, eyeing the cigarettes with a strange nostalgia. "I do not think smoking is that bad for you. I think tobacco's a vegetable." Reba ignored her. "Cheyenne, take it from me. It is not worth it. I mean, sure, you look cool and sophisticated, especially if you've got a sterling silver case in a holder like I did, but..." Cheyenne's eyes widened. "You used to smoke." "Pack a day," Reba admitted, the memory of the acrid smoke and the secret rebellion of her youth flickering in her mind. "And I'm telling you, smoking makes you a social pariah. Nobody wants anything to do with you." "Are you sure they knew you smoked?" Barbara Jean asked innocently. "Unhung Fräulein." Cheyenne slumped into a kitchen chair. "Okay, look, I know it's bad for me, but it helps me not want to drink. Every time I get that itch, I light up. It gives my hands something to do. It gives my lungs something to feel besides that empty ache." Reba felt a pang of pure, unadulterated mother guilt. "Honey, if you're having such a hard time, maybe I shouldn't have this party. There's going to be an open bar. There's going to be wine everywhere." "No, Mom," Cheyenne said firmly. "I told you, I cannot live in some fake world and pretend that alcohol doesn't exist. I have to learn to live in the real one. I just need to smoke right now to help me get through this. It's my crutch." "Okay, let me have the crutch for a while." Barbara Jean nodded sagely. "Cheyenne, I'm sure if you quit smoking, Reba will let you have a snort now and then." "No," Reba shouted. "She will not smoke, and she will not drink. As for you, Barbara Jean, you can smoke and drink and go skydiving for all I care, but my daughter is staying sober." My, Barbara Jean muttered, backing toward the door. "I bet she's the life of all." As the door clicked shut behind Barbara Jean, the kitchen fell into a tense silence. Reba looked at her daughter, seeing the survivor in her eyes, same fighter's heart that Reba carried. "I'm a survivor," Reba thought. "A single mom who works too hard, who loves her kids and never stops, with gentle hands and the heart of a fighter." But as she looked at the cigarettes on the counter, she wondered if being a fighter was enough to save her daughter from herself. Chapter 2. The Conversational Pieces. Van Montgomery was a man of simple pleasures and complex misunderstandings. As Reba's son-in-law, and now, somewhat reluctantly, her junior partner in real estate, he took his new career with a level of seriousness that was both endearing and terrifying. He entered the living room later that afternoon, clutching a stack of index cards. "Hey, Mrs. H," he called out. "Good news, I'm ready for the party." Reba was busy arranging a tray of appetizers that looked far more expensive than they actually were. "Good, Van. I've got a grocery list for you." "Sorry, don't have time," Van said, shuffling through his cards. "I still have to work on my conversational pieces." Reba stopped, a stuffed mushroom midair. "Conversational pieces." "Hey, it's hard work being witty," Van explained, his brow furrowing in deep concentration. "And I don't want to step on my tongue like the last party. I don't know why pregnant women get so touchy when you ask them when they're due." Reba sighed. "Van, that's because she wasn't pregnant. And she wasn't a she." Van paused, a look of genuine confusion crossing his face. "Well, I'm pretty sure he was wearing maternity pants." "Van, listen to me," Reba said, stepping closer and lowering her voice. "Cheyenne is going through some stuff. A lot of stuff." Van's expression shifted instantly to one of "Yeah, I know. Watch her like a hawk." "Got it." "I was going to say, be supportive," Reba correct. "Supportive hawk. Understood. Man, I take this job seriously, Mrs. H." Reba watched him go, his lips moving as he rehearsed his wit. She was worried. She was worried that Cheyenne was having a harder time than she let on. And she was worried that the support system she had built, dim-witted but golden-hearted football player, and an eccentric neighbor was more of a circus than a safety net. Outside on the porch, Cheyenne was trying to find a moment of peace. The itch was back, the low-frequency hum in her blood that whispered for a drink. She reached for her cigarettes, but then she saw Van approaching. "Man, Cheyenne," Van said, leaning against the railing. "Your mum's got a bug up her nose. She's all over me about how I should be watching you like a hawk, and what a tough time you're going through. She's all, grr, I'm Reba. Watch out for the obstacles." Cheyenne stiffened. Wait, why is she supposed to be watching me? Was she asking about my drinking again? "Yeah," Van said, oblivious to the tension he was creating. "Like, I don't pay attention. I'm your husband. Red, I got this. I know what she's up to, but I didn't tell her, because I'm afraid of her." Cheyenne stood up, the cigarette unlit in her hand. "This is really starting to get on my nerves. I mean, you admit you have a problem, you take the steps to deal with it, and then all of a sudden, everybody treats you like you're a completely different person. Why can't everyone realize that I'm just the same old Cheyenne as I always was?" "Exactly," Van agreed, happy to be on her side. "I realize it because I'm aware. Hey, can I have one of those vitamins?" He pointed to the small amber bottle peeking out of her purse. "Give me a Wilma and a Dino. Actually, I had a Dino yesterday. Make it a Barney." "No, Van," Cheyenne said, snatching her purse away. "Those vitamins are not for you." "Are those chick vitamins? Will I grow boobs?" Cheyenne looked at him, then looked around to make sure her mother wasn't in earshot. She felt a sudden, desperate need to trust someone, even if that someone was Van. "Okay, I'm going to tell you something, but you cannot repeat it," she whispered. "This isn't a vitamin. It's called D." Van blinked. "You're right. I can't repeat that. It's a prescription medicine for alcoholics," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. "It's called Booze Away. If you have even a drop of alcohol while this is in your system, it makes you violently ill. Like, hospital-grade sick." Van's jaw dropped. "A pill that makes you sick if you drink. Well, doesn't that ruin drinking?" "That's the point, Van. It's my insurance policy. I know that if I take one of these in the morning, I can't have a drink at the party tonight. Even if I want one, it takes the choice out of my hands." "So why are you hiding them from your mom?" "Because she's already on my case about everything," Cheyenne hissed. "She's always snooping around, looking for signs of trouble. If she knows I'm taking these, she'll think I'm failing. She'll think I don't have the willpower to do it on my own. So promise me, Van, if she asks, those are just vitamins." "Got it," Van said, his chest puffing out with the weight of the secret. "Your secret is safe with the hawk." Chapter 3. The Seduction of the Leaf. Inside, the house was being transformed. Reba moved like a general, positioning floral arrangements and checking the temperature of the wine. Brock, her ex-husband, had arrived early, ostensibly, to help, though Reba knew he was mostly there to avoid Barbara Jean's latest craft project. Brock found Reba in the kitchen, hovering over the liquor cabinet. "Geez," Reba Brock said, eyeing the rows of bottles. "You sure did get a lot of booze for a real estate mixer." "Well, Brock, a lot of people feel uncomfortable at these things," Reba said, not looking at him. "A few drinks help break down the barriers. That way they can relax and get right to Van's conversational pieces." Brock leaned against the counter. "I'm worried about Cheyenne, Reba." "We're all worried about Cheyenne. Brock, that's our full-time job now." "I know, but I think we should be impressed. She hasn't had a drink in 2 weeks." "I haven't peed in 6 hours, Reba retorted. "Staying dry isn't the same as being well. When someone gives up something big, they pick up other things. Things we might wish they weren't doing." "Like what?" "Like smoking," Reba said, pointing a finger at him. Later, Reba found Kira, her middle child, sitting on the stairs. Kira was the observer of the family, sharp-tongued and cynical, a mirror of Reba's own wit. "Kira," Reba said, sitting down beside her, "I just wanted to make sure, about Cheyenne smoking. I don't want you to look at her and think she looks cool." Kira rolled her eyes. "Mom, I've seen people smoke. It's not a mystery. It makes you smell like a wet campfire." "I know how seductive it can be," Kira Brock added, joining them. "I used to smoke. I quit before Cheyenne was born." "Good for you, Dad," Kira said flatly. "You might find yourself in a situation where somebody offers you one," Brock continued, getting into his dad voice. "That's when you use that powerful just say no technique. Just smell that tobacco. They might say." "I have used it, Dad," It's called walking away, Kira said, standing up. You can throw those away now. She pointed to the pack Brock had confiscated from Cheyenne earlier, which was now sitting in his shirt pocket. Darn straight I'm throwing them away, Brock declared, though his hand lingered on the pocket for a second too long. Because smoking is bad and evil. Kira, bad and evil. As Kira walked away, Reba caught Brock's eye. You're going to smoke one of those, aren't you? Reba, I'm a professional. Chapter 4. The Poisoned Chalice. The party was in full swing. The house was filled with the low hum of Houston's elite lawyers and agents, all clutching crystal glasses of Chardonnay and Scotch. Reba was in her element, navigating the room with a practiced smile, though her eyes were constantly tracking Cheyenne. Cheyenne was doing well holding a ginger ale, laughing at the right moments. But Reba's anxiety was a physical weight. She found herself in the kitchen, catching her breath. On the counter sat Cheyenne's purse. I shouldn't, Reba whispered to herself. It's a violation of privacy. It's wrong. She opened the purse. I'm doing this because I love her, she justified. I'm protecting her. She didn't find cigarettes. Instead, she found the amber bottle. Vitamins, Reba murmured, reading the label. Booze away. No, that can't be right. She squinted at the fine print. 1 pill, daily, for the treatment of... At that moment, Van burst into the kitchen, looking frantic. Mrs. H, I need your help. I've been trying to keep people away from the vodka, but he stopped, seeing the bottle in Reba's hand. Van, what is this? Reba asked, her voice low and dangerous. Those are chick vitamins for your bones, because you're, vintage. Van, don't lie to me. I can read. Van looked trapped. Look, Mrs. H, you look terrific. You're hot. If I wasn't married to your daughter, I would totally... Stop it. What are these pills? Van sighed, his shoulders slumping. It's Cheyenne's secret. It's called Booze Away. It makes you violently ill if you drink alcohol. She takes them, so she won't be tempted. Reba looked at the bottle, a wave of complex emotions washing over her. Relief that Cheyenne was taking it seriously, guilt for snooping, and then a sudden, sharp realization. She had been so stressed all day, her head was pounding. She had reached into her own purse earlier for a Vidimo, but her purse was identical to They were both the same shade of leather, both sitting on the counter. Reba looked at her own open purse on the other side of the counter. It was empty of its vitamin bottle. She looked at the Booze Away bottle in her hand. It was missing 1 pill. Oh, God, Reba whispered, her face turning pale. What? Van asked. Van, I think I took one about 20 minutes ago. I thought it was my multivitamin. Van's eyes went wide. You took a Booze Away. I think so. And you've been drinking wine all night? Reba looked at the empty glass in her hand. Just 1 glass. Maybe a glass and a half. Mrs. H. Van said, his voice dropping to a whisper of pure dread. You're gonna blow like Mount Rushmore. Chapter 5. The Toast. The realization hit Reba like a physical blow. The chemical reaction was already beginning. A slow, hot crawling sensation was spreading from her stomach to her chest. Her heart began to race, not with anxiety, but with a strange, medicinal rhythm. I have to tell everyone, Reba gasped, clutching the counter. Now, Van hissed. In the middle of the big mixer, you have to give the keynote speech in 5 minutes. I can't be sick in front of the head of the real estate board, Van. Maybe if we dilute it, Van suggested, grabbing a bottle of vodka. Wait, no, that's the opposite. Maybe if I drink it all for you. He started to unscrew a bottle of scotch. Van, stop. Just help me get through the speech. If I can just get through the speech and get everyone out of here, I can go upstairs and die in peace. Reba smoothed her dress, wiped the cold sweat from her brow, and stepped back into the living room. The room felt tilted. The lights were too bright. She saw Brock in the corner, looking suspiciously relaxed. He smelled faintly of menthol and guilt. She saw Barbara Jean, who had somehow snuck back in, and was currently cornering a developer to talk about the soul of a bundt cake. Everyone, pardon me, Reba called out, her voice sounding far away to her own ears. The room went silent. All eyes turned to the hearth fire of Houston. I'd like to thank you all for coming out today, Reba began, her hand gripping the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. You know, real estate isn't about houses and land. It's about people. And Van and I feel like our clients are the best darned people in all of Houston. A wave of nausea rolled over her. She felt her face flushing a deep, plum purple, classic disulfiram reaction. So, cheers, she managed, lifting a glass. Mrs. E. Van whispered from the side. Reba paused. She looked at the wine. If she drank this, she would likely collapse on the spot. Real estate is also about family. She pivoted, her voice straining. Family togetherness. And, speaking of family, she looked at a guest who was, indeed, quite large. Looks like someone's starting her own family. Ma'am, when are you due? The woman froze. I'm not pregnant. And she is not a she. Van shouted from the wings, trying to help and failing miserably. The room plunged into an awkward, suffocating silence. So, everyone, cheers, Reba said, her vision beginning to tunnel. Stick around, have a great time, relax. And when you go home tonight, think about who put you there. Oh, God. Excuse me. Reba turned and bolted for the stairs. The party guests watched in stunned silence as their host sprinted away, followed closely by a panicked Van Montgomery. Wow, one developer muttered. This has given us a lot to think about. Chapter 6. The Canola Oil Confession. While the drama unfolded in the main house, Brockhart was dealing with his own crisis in the guest house. He had succumbed to the seductive leaf. The 3 cigarettes he had smoked in rapid succession had left him feeling lightheaded and smelling like an old ashtray. He was currently in the bathroom, desperately trying to cover the scent. He had already used half a bottle of cologne and an entire can of lemon-scented air freshener. In a moment of desperation, he reached under the sink and found a bottle of Barbara Jean's natural skin glow spray, which turned out to be canola oil in a fancy bottle. He was misting himself when Barbara Jean burst in. "Brock, what are you doing?" Brock froze, the spray bottled midair. "Moisturizing?" Barbara Jean narrowed her eyes, sniffing the air. "It smells like a French fry factory in here, and every time I walk into a room today, you are spraying yourself with something. Cologne, air freshener, and now, cooking spray. They say it's very good for the skin. BJ. Liar, Barbara Jean shouted. What's her name? Whose name? The skirt you've been running around with. The one whose perfume you're trying to cover up. Is it that tramp, Kathy Tillman? Brock, it's not Kathy Tillman. Then who is she? Brock sighed, the weight of the deception finally breaking him. Barbara Jean. Look, it's this. He pulled the crumpled pack of cigarettes from his pocket. I've been smoking. Barbara Jean gasped, her hand flying to her heart. Smoking? Who got you hooked on smoking? That tramp Kathy Tillman? Barbara Jean. Think, what would I need with another woman when I have these? He shook the pack. Honey, this is not okay, Barbara Jean said, her voice turning soft and maternal. We have 2 children living in this house. You cannot smoke. This has got to stop. It will, Brock promised, feeling a genuine wave of shame. I'll go to the store. I'll get the patches. I'll get the gum. I'm sorry I got so crazy. It's okay, Barbara Jean said, hugging him. And just so you know, Kathy Tillman is one of my nearest and dearest friends. I feel so embarrassed for accusing her. Don't worry, Brock muttered into her hair. I'm sure she's used to it. Chapter 7. The Bell. Back in the main house, the party had dispersed in a cloud of confusion. Reba was upstairs, lying across her bed with a cold compress on her head. The nausea had subsided into a dull, throbbing ache, but the humiliation was fresh. Cheyenne sat on the edge of the bed, watching her mother. I don't understand it, Reba moaned. I was feeling terrific. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, Van added, hovering in the doorway. I mean, you eat right, you work out, you take your vitamins. Knock it off, Van Cheyenne snapped. What are you talking about? Reba asked, peering out from under the Cheyenne took a deep breath. Mom, the vitamin you took. It wasn't a vitamin. It was my booze-away pill. I put it in an old vitamin bottle. So you wouldn't find it, but you found it anyway, and you took it. Reba sat up slowly, the compress falling to the quilt. You take a pill so you don't drink. Yes. What did they think about that down at the meeting? Cheyenne looked away. About the meetings. I stopped going. Reba's heart sank. Cheyenne, why? Why would you stop going? Because they got a bell, Mom, Cheyenne shouted, her frustration finally boiling over. You used to be able to talk about yourself for as long as you wanted, and everyone had to listen. But now, when they think you talk too long, they ring a bell on you, and I'm the only one they do it to. Reba stared at her daughter. Oh, honey, I'm sure it just seems that way. They call it getting Reba felt a laugh bubbling up in her chest, a hysterical, exhausted laugh. Well, what are those people thinking? The whole point of the meeting is so you'll talk about your drinking. Cheyenne bit her lip. Okay, well, that's not exactly what I talk about. What do you talk about? I talk about lots of stuff. You know, shopping, and makeup, and shoes, and who should have won American Idol. Cheyenne, Reba said, her voice turning firm. It's a 12-step meeting, not a slumber party. Why don't you talk about the drinking? Because it's embarrassing. Mom, it's ugly, and it's sad, and I don't want to be the sad girl in the room. Really, more embarrassing than getting Cheyenne looked down at her hands. I just want this to be over. I want to be normal again. Reba reached out and took her daughter's hand. I know you do, honey, but it's going to be a struggle. It's something you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. There are no shortcuts, not cigarettes, and not even booze-away pills. Thanks for the pep talk, Cheyenne muttered. I'm through giving you pep talks, Reba said. You're going to have to stop taking the easy way out. You're a survivor, Cheyenne, but you have to survive the hard way. So I'm supposed to go back to those meetings and let them ring a bell on me. If that's what it takes to get you better, then yes, ma'am. You're going to have to do it. Cheyenne sighed, a long, shaky breath. Fine, but I'm going to start by telling them how mean my mom is. Reba smiled, a real, tired smile. You do that, honey. You tell them everything. As Cheyenne walked toward the door, she stopped. Then, I need you to come upstairs and help me clean the lamp I broke earlier. Viva Vaughn shouted, for no apparent reason. Viva! Viva! As they left the room, Reba lay back on the pillows. Her life was a mess. Her house smelled like cheap wine and canola oil. Her daughter was an alcoholic who talked too much at meetings. Her ex-husband was a closet smoker. But as she listened to the sound of her family's voices echoing in the hallway, she felt a strange, quiet peace. She was a survivor, and for today, that was enough. Chapter 8. The Room of Broken Echoes. The basement of St. Jude's smelled of stale coffee, floor wax, and the collective size of 30 people trying to bargain with their demons. Cheyenne stood at the top of the stairs, her fingers white-knuckled around the strap of her purse. Inside that purse was a fresh pack of cigarettes she hadn't touched yet, and her amber bottle of vitamins. She hated this room. She hated the fluorescent lights that hummed like a migraine and the mismatched folding chairs that screeched against the linoleum. Most of all, she hated the bell. It sat on the moderator's table, a polished brass beast that felt like a personal insult. You can do this, she whispered to herself. She took a seat in the back row, hoping to remain invisible. But in this room, anonymity didn't mean being unseen. It meant being known by your struggle. The moderator, a man named Gary who looked like he had been carved out of old leather and regret, tapped the bell once. Ding! All right, folks, let's start. Who needs the floor? A few hands went up. One woman talked about her daughter's wedding and how she almost reached for a champagne flute. A man talked about losing his job and finding a bottle of bourbon in the back of his pantry. Cheyenne listened, her foot tapping a frantic rhythm. She wanted to speak, but the words felt like jagged glass in her throat. Finally, Gary looked toward the back. Cheyenne, we missed you last week. You want to share? Cheyenne stood up slowly. The room went quiet. Hi, I'm Cheyenne, and, well, I'm here. Hi, Cheyenne, the room chanted back. I had a rough week. She started. My mom threw this big party. It was a disaster. I ended up hiding these pills in a vitamin bottle, and she took one and got sick. And I felt like I was the reason everything was falling apart. Again. She felt the familiar urge to pivot. And then I went to the mall to clear my head, and I saw these shoes. They were Steve Madden, and they had these little sparkles on the heel. Ding! Gary had his hand on the bell. Cheyenne stopped. Her face burned. I wasn't done. Shoes aren't the struggle, Cheyenne, Gary said gently. The shoes are the distraction. Why are you distracting us? Why are you distracting yourself? Cheyenne felt a surge of hot, righteous anger. Because the shoes are happy. The shoes don't make me want to cry in my car at 3 in the morning. The shoes don't remind me that I can't trust my own brain. The room was silent. Gary didn't ring the bell. He just waited. Cheyenne's voice broke. I'm scared. I'm 20 years old, and I feel like I've already broken my life every time I think about the drinking. So yeah, I talk about shoes. I talk about American Idol. I talk about anything that isn't the fact that I want to drink so bad right now. I could taste the copper on my tongue. She sat down abruptly, her heart pounding against her ribs. For the first time, Gary didn't ring the bell to end her turn. He just nodded. Thanks for sharing, Cheyenne. Truly. As the meeting ended, a woman named Sarah approached her. Sarah was older, with silver hair and kind, weary eyes. The first time you stop talking about the shoes is the hardest, Sarah said. But it's the only way you'll ever find the ground under your feet again. Cheyenne walked out into the cool Houston night. She didn't reach for her cigarettes. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe without a crutch. Chapter 9. The Ashford Intrusion. While Cheyenne was fighting for her soul in a church basement, Reba was fighting for a commission in a glass-walled office downtown. The real estate market in Houston was a blood sport, and Reba was a seasoned gladiator. But lately, a new name had been appearing on the sold signs in her neighborhood. Ashford and Associates. Julian Ashford was everything Reba found irritating in a man. He was polished, he was arrogant, and he had a smile that suggested he knew exactly how much your house was worth before he even stepped through the front door. Reba was at the local title company, waiting for a closing, when Julian walked in. He was wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Reba's first car. Reba Hart, he said, leaning against the counter. I saw your sign on the Miller property. Bold move. Asking that much for a wrench tie with original plumbing. Reba didn't look up from her paperwork. It's called vintage charm, Julian. Something you wouldn't understand, given that you seem to specialize in soulless glass boxes. Julian laughed. A rich, warm sound that made the hair on the back of Reba's neck stand up. Ouch. You always this prickly, or did I catch you on a bad day? I don't have bad days, Reba snapped, finally looking at him. I have challenges that I overcome. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a closing to finish. I'm actually here to offer you a deal, Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. Reba paused. A deal. I'm developing the New Heights project, 20 luxury townhomes. I need a partner who knows the local pulse. Someone with, let's say, a survivor's instinct. Reba narrowed her eyes. You're asking me to work for you. With me, Julian corrected. Think about it, Reba. We'd be unstoppable, your reputation and my capital. I'll think about it when pigs fly and the Astros win 3 World Series in a row, Reba said, gathering her things. But as she walked away, she couldn't help but notice the way his eyes lingered on her. It had been a long time since a man had looked at her like she was more than just the agent, or the mom. It was annoying. It was distracting. And, God help her, it was a little bit exciting. Chapter 10. The Patch Protocol. In the guest house, Brock Hart was experiencing the 5 stages of grief, mostly directed at a small nicotine patch stuck to his upper arm. It itches, BJ. It's like a tiny, angry squirrel is biting me. Barbara Jean was wearing a surgical mask and holding a clipboard. That's just the toxins leaving your body. It's the healing process. I've designed a full clean air protocol for our home. She pointed to a series of posters she had taped to the walls. They featured drawings of happy lungs and sad, blackened cigarettes. I don't need posters, Barbara Jean. I need a cigarette, just one puff, for medicinal purposes. No, Barbara Jean barked, blowing a whistle she had hanging around her neck. Cravings are just thoughts, and we don't listen to bad thoughts. Now, open your mouth. It's time for your carrot juice. Brock groaned. Carrot juice. I thought we were having steak. Steak is a trigger food, Brock. It makes you want to post-dinner smoke. From now on, we're eating neutral foods, carrots, celery, and unseasoned tofu. Brock looked at the glass of orange sludge in her hand. I'd rather go back to Kathy Tillman. Barbara Jean froze. What did you say? Nothing. I'm drinking the carrots. As Brock gulped down the juice, trying not to gag, Barbara Jean beamed. See, we're a team. We're conquering the leaf together. Later that night, Brock snuck out to the porch, hoping to find a stray cigarette in the crocks of the floorboards. Instead, he found Cheyenne sitting on the steps, looking at the moon. "Hey, kiddo," he said, sitting down beside her. "You looking for a smoke?" Cheyenne shook her head. "I gave the pack to Van. He promised to bury it in the backyard." Brock sighed. "Your mother's right. This stuff is hard." "It's not just the stuff, Dad," Cheyenne said softly. "It's the feeling that you need something else to be okay." Brock looked at his daughter, and for the first time in years, he didn't see a child. He saw a woman who was fighting a war he had spent his life avoiding. "I'm proud of you, Cheyenne," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're stronger than I ever was." "We're hearts, Dad," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We're survivors, even if we have to survive on carrot juice." Chapter 11. The Hearth Fire. Reba was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of herbal tea, when the back door opened. It was late, and the house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Cheyenne walked in, looking exhausted but strangely peaceful. "How was the meeting?" Reba asked, almost afraid of the answer. Cheyenne sat down at the table. "Gary rang the bell on me." Reba winced. "I'm sorry, honey." "No," Cheyenne said, a small smile playing on her lips. "He was right. I was talking about shoes again. But then, I stopped. I talked about being scared. I talked about wanting to drink. And Reba, the room didn't fall apart. I didn't fall apart." Reba felt a lump form in her throat. She reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I knew you could do it." "Mom, why did you really marry Dad?" The question caught Reba off guard. "What? Why now?" "Because I'm trying to understand," Cheyenne said. "I'm trying to understand if we choose our struggles, or if they choose us." Reba looked into her tea, the steam rising in delicate swirls. "I married him because he made me feel like the sun rose and set on my shoulders. He was charming and fun, and I thought I could be the one to keep his feet on the ground." She sighed. "But you can't be someone else's gravity. Cheyenne, people have to learn to stand on their own. I spent 20 years trying to stand for both of us. That's why I was so tired. That's why I'm so protective of you. I don't want you to be my gravity, Mom," Cheyenne said. "I just want you to be here." "I'm not going anywhere," Reba promised. As Cheyenne went upstairs, Reba stayed in the kitchen. She thought about the party, the disulfiram reaction, the Gitch and Bell, and the strange, lingering look in Julian Ashford's eyes. Her life was a construction site, messy, loud, and full of half-finished projects. But as she looked around her home, she realized she was the architect. She was building something new, something stronger. She took a sip of her tea and smiled. The Houston humidity might be heavy, but Reba Hart was finally learning how to carry it. Chapter 12. The Heights Proposal. The following Tuesday, Reba found herself sitting in a corner booth at the Common Bond, a chic bakery in the Heights. The air was thick with the scent of expensive espresso and buttered croissant. Across from her, Julian Ashford was looking entirely too comfortable. "I didn't think you'd actually come," Julian said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm here for the potential commission, Julian." "Don't flatter yourself," Reba replied, taking a cautious sip of her tea. He laid out a set of blueprints on the marble table. "The Heights project, 20 units, modern, but with materials that respect the historic feel of the neighborhood. I need someone who can sell the lifestyle, Reba, not just the square footage." Reba looked at the plans. They were impressive clean lines, large windows, shared green spaces. "You're targeting the young professionals, the ones who want to live near downtown but still want a porch." "Exactly, and you're the only one who can talk to them without sounding like a corporate brochure. You have that authenticity." He leaned in closer. "Plus, I've seen how you handled that Miller property closing. You don't back down." Reba felt a flush that had nothing to do with It's called professional tenacity. "I call it attractive," Julian said quietly. Reba nearly choked on her tea. "Excuse me. Working with you would be stimulating," he continued, unfazed. "We disagree on almost everything, Reba. That's why it would work. You'd keep me from being too clinical, and I'd keep you from being too nostalgic." "I am not nostalgic," Reba "I am appreciative of quality." "Then appreciate this," he said, sliding a contract toward her. "The lead agent position is yours. 50-50, split on the developer's side." Reba looked at the numbers. It was more than she'd made in the last 3 months combined. It was the kind of deal that could secure Cheyenne's future and finally get Van into a suit that fit. "I'll have my lawyer look it over," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I look forward to it," Julian said, standing up. He reached out and touched her hand, just for a second. "Don't fight it too hard, Reba. Some obstacles are meant to be walked through, not over." As he walked out, Reba sat there, staring at the blueprints. She was a survivor, yes, but she hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd allowed herself to be a woman. Chapter 13. Van Montgomery was currently standing in the middle of a dilapidated 3-bedroom ranch in Sugar Land, sweating profusely. It was his first solo open house, and the only person who had showed up was a stray cat and a very confused elderly man looking for a hardware store. Conversational piece, number 4, Van whispered to himself, adjusting his tie. "Did you know that the open-concept kitchen was actually popularized in the 1970s as a way to encourage family interaction?" "No, that's too long. How about kitchens? Therefore, cooking." The front door creaked open, and a young couple walked in. They looked exhausted, kind of tired that comes from looking at 12 houses in one weekend. "Hi, welcome," Van shouted, a little too loud. "I'm Van. Are you looking for a house? Because this is one." The man, whose name was David, looked around at the stained carpet. "It's smaller than the pictures." "Everything is," Van agreed. "Like me. On TV I look 6'6", but in person, I'm only 6. David's wife, Elena, sighed. "We're just looking for somewhere with a decent backyard for our dog. Every house in our budget has a yard the size of a postage stamp." Van looked at them. He saw the frustration. He saw the same look Reba got when the grocery bill was too high. He forgot his index cards. "Look," Van said, his voice dropping the professional facade. "This place is a bit of a dump. The carpet is gross, and the wallpaper looks like something out of a horror movie. But look at that oak tree in the back." He led them to the window. "That tree is 50 years old. You can't buy a 50-year-old tree at Home Depot. My daughter, Elizabeth, she's just a toddler, but she loves to climb things. If I lived here, I'd build her the biggest treehouse in Texas right there." Elena looked at the tree, for the first time all day, her expression soft. "We're thinking about starting a family soon." "Then you need a tree," Van said firmly. "The house, you can change the carpet, you can paint the walls. My mother-in-law, Reba, she says a house is just a skeleton. You're the heart." An hour later, Van was calling Reba, his voice cracking with excitement. "Mrs. H, I did it. They want to put in an offer, and I didn't even use the one about the maternity pants." "I'm proud of you, Van," Reba said over the phone, and she meant it. "You found the heart. That's the hardest part of the job." Chapter 14. The Old Ghost. Cheyenne was at the Galleria, trying to find a dress for a friend's engagement party. She was feeling good 14 days sober, no cigarettes in 48 hours, and her skin was starting to lose that sallow, grayish tint. She was exiting a boutique when she saw her. Kelly. They had been drinking sisters for 2 years. Kelly was the one who always knew which bars didn't check IDs and which ones stayed open after hours. "Cheyenne, oh my God, girl, where have you been?" Kelly screamed, stumbling slightly as she approached. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but Cheyenne could smell the margarita on her breath from 3 feet away. "Hey, Kelly," Cheyenne said, her stomach doing a slow, nauseous flip. "We missed you at the lake last weekend. It was insane. I think I lost my phone in a jet ski accident, but who cares, right? Come on. Let's go grab a drink at the bistro. I'm having a serious tequila emergency." Cheyenne looked at her friend. Kelly's eyes were bloodshot, her makeup was smeared, and she had a frantic, hollow energy that Cheyenne recognized all too well. It was the energy of someone who was running away from themselves at full speed. "I can't, Kelly," Cheyenne said quietly. "Oh, don't be just one, for old time's sake." The itch flared up instantly. Cheyenne could almost feel the cold glass in her hand, the sharp burn of the alcohol hitting her throat, the way the world would suddenly become soft and blurry and easy. The shoes of the distraction. Gary's voice echoed in her head. "I'm sober," Kelly Cheyenne said, her voice gaining strength. "I'm in a program. I can't be around it." Kelly's face shifted from confusion to a sneer. "Oh, you're one of those now? Fine. Go back to your boring, perfect life. I'll find someone who actually knows how to have fun." Kelly turned and marched away, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. Cheyenne stood there for a long time, her heart hammering. She felt a profound sense of loss not for Kelly, but for the person she used to be, the person who didn't have to fight every single day. But then, she looked at her reflection in the mall window. She saw a woman who was standing up straight. She saw a woman whose eyes were clear. She walked away from the bistro, toward the exit. She didn't buy a dress. She didn't need a new outfit to be the new Cheyenne. Chapter 15. The Unlikely Alliance. Reba found Brock in the backyard later that evening. He was sitting on a lawn chair, staring intensely at a blade of grass. "You okay, Brock? You look like you're trying to set that grass on fire with your mind," Reba said, sitting down in the chair next to him. "It's the patch, Reba. I think it's sentient. I think it's trying to take over my nervous system," Brock grumbled. "It's just nicotine, Brock, not an alien parasite." He looked at her. "I feel like everything is changing. Cheyenne is getting sober. You're doing these big deals with Julian Ash, and I'm just sitting here, smelling like carrot juice and wearing a sticker." Reba looked at the man she had loved for half her life. "Change is hard, Brock. It feels like losing something, even when you're gaining something better." "Do you like him?" Brock asked suddenly. Reba hesitated. "He's irritating. He's arrogant. He thinks he knows everything." "So, you like him?" Brock concluded with a wry smile. "He makes me feel capable," Reba admitted. "He doesn't look at me like I'm a single mom he looks at me like I'm a partner." "You are a partner, Reba. You always were. I was just too busy being Brock to notice." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the Houston cicadas rising in a deafening chorus. It was a comfortable, silencia kind that only exists between people who have survived a war together. "Reba?" "Yeah, Brock. If I stay off the cigarettes for a month, will you tell Barbara Jean to let me have a steak? A real one, with butter." Reba laughed, a sound that carried across the yard. "I'll see what I can do, Brock. But you're on your own with the carrot juice." As she walked back into the house, Reba felt the weight of the day lifting. Cheyenne had stood her ground. Van had found his voice. And Reba was finally starting to believe that being a survivor wasn't just about making it through the storm. It was about learning how to dance in the rain. The Texas Flip. A novel of risk, love, and real estate. Chapter 1. The Curse of the Redhead. The Texas sun was an unapologetic weight, pressing down on the asphalt of the Houston suburbs, until the air shimmered with the ghost of heat. Inside the Hart household, Reba Hart sat at the kitchen table. A stack of closing documents mocked her from under the fluorescent light. She was a woman built of grit and fire-red hair, but today, the fire felt like it was smoldering under a pile of damp ashes. "I sold it," Reba announced to the empty room, her voice a mixture of triumph and poison. "That little starter home on Elm Street, the one I've been nursing like a sick kitten for 6 months, gone." Cheyenne, her eldest daughter, wandered in, balancing a toddler on one hip and a look of vague concern on her face. "That's good, right, Mom? Isn't selling houses the whole point of your job?" Reba let out a dry, hacking laugh. "In theory, yes. In practice, I am apparently a charitable organization for people named David Davids." She explained the sting. David David's a man whose parents were clearly as uninspired as his business ethics was. Another agent at her firm. He hadn't bought the house to live in. He hadn't bought it to help a family. He had bought it to flip it. Within 48 hours, he had listed it for $50,000 more than Reba had sold it for. 50 grand. "Cheyenne," Reba whispered, the number tasting like copper in her mouth. "He made my annual salary in a weekend, because he had the stones to buy low. I'm the one getting tossed around while everyone else lands on their feet." "Well," Cheyenne said, sliding into the chair opposite her mother, "why don't you just be the flipper? You know more about these houses than anyone." Reba looked at her daughter with the weary patience of a woman who had seen the bottom of a wine bottle and the bottom of a bank account. "Because, honey, the bank doesn't lend money to red-headed women with grit. They lend it to people with high credit scores. Mine took a nosedive during the divorce and never pulled out of the tailspin. Don't ever get divorced. Cheyenne, it ruins your soul and your interest rates." The conversation shifted, as it often did in the Hart house, toward the absurd. They discussed Van, Cheyenne's husband, former high school football star whose professional career had ended with an injury and whose current career consisted mostly of being charming and occasionally profound in the most unexpected ways. Van has a pre-approval letter, Cheyenne mentioned casually. Reba froze. What? He got it months ago. Every time he and Brock get into a fight and Brock threatens to kick us out of the guest house, Van gets paranoid. He wanted a quick exit strategy. He's got the credit. Mom, he's got the golden ticket. Reba's mind began to whir. It was a dangerous sound, a sound of a woman who had nothing left to lose, and a bottle of whiteout in the junk drawer. Chapter 2. The Froth on the Market. Van Montgomery was a man of simple pleasures. A good sandwich, a loud television, and the unwavering belief that he was the protagonist of a very interesting movie. When Reba approached him with the partnership, he didn't react with the excitement she expected. Instead, he leaned back in his recliner, looking like a retired Pass, Van said. Reba blinked. Pass, Van. I am offering you the chance of a lifetime. We use your credit, my brains, and we rake in the cash. We could be the next power duo of Houston real estate. Mrs. H. Van said, using the nickname that always made Reba feel both respected and incredibly old. The housing market is falsely inflated. It's full of untrained speculators. To quote Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, the froth is on the market. Reba stared at him. Do you even know what that means? Did you just eat a dictionary? I know that when an old guy in a suit talks about money, I listen, Van replied. Risk is for people who have something to gain. I have everything I need right here. Why would I gamble our future on a bubble that's about to burst? But Reba knew Van. She knew he was a creature of ego. She knew that he prided himself on his stones, that elusive, masculine quality of bravery. You're just afraid, Reba challenged, her eyes narrowing. David Davids is making a fortune because he has the nerve. You're just talking. Van bristled. The air in the room changed. You think I don't have stones? I put forks in toasters. Mrs. H. I live on the edge. A fork in a toaster gets you an English muffin and a mild heart arrhythmia, Reba snapped. Buying a house gets you a life. I guarantee you, I will find a house to flip within the week. 7 days. You in or out? Van looked at her, the challenge hanging between them like a physical weight. 1 week, or 7 days, whichever comes first. You find the deal. I provide the credit. But if it blows up, it's on your red head. Chapter 3. The Satellite Confessional. While Reba and Van were plotting their financial empire, Brock Hart was experiencing a different kind of crisis. Brock, a dentist with a penchant for midlife crisis purchases and a leopard print thong he thought was fun, was currently lost. He was driving his expensive SUV, his second wife Barbara Jean in the passenger seat. They were supposed to be at the opera. They were currently in a cul-de-sac that looked suspiciously like the one they had left 20 minutes ago. We missed the first act. Brock, Barbara Jean sighed. She was a woman who lived for drama, ruffles, and the feeling of being cherished. If you had just asked for directions. I don't need directions. I'm a dentist. I navigate complex root canals every day, Brock shouted, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. And don't talk to me about the opera. No straight man wants to go to the opera. I bought those tickets as a sacrifice. A sacrifice? Barbara Jean's voice hit a high, tremulous note. I just wanted adult conversation, Brock. I spend all day with a 3-year-old. I need someone to talk to who doesn't use a diaper. In a fit of pique, Barbara Jean reached out and pressed the blue button on the rearview mirror of the Iconostar assistance system. Don't touch that, Brock yelled. It costs $2 a minute, plus tax. Hello, this is Hal from Iconostar. How can I assist you today? A smooth, calm voice drifted through the car speakers. Barbara Jean's face lit up. Oh, hi, Hal. I'm Barbara Jean. You sound very helpful. I tried to be. Barbara Jean. Are you lost? In more ways than one. Hal. In more ways than one. Over the next week, as Reba scoured the city for a house, Barbara Jean found a new while Brock retreated into his silence and his dental journals. Barbara Jean sat in the parked car in the garage, talking to the satellite. She told Hal about her childhood in Friendly, Texas. She told him about her sister, but ugly Lori Ann. She told him about the loneliness that gnawed at the edges of her bubbly personality. It was a romance of the digital age, a woman seeking a voice in the dark, and a man paid by the hour to listen. Chapter 4. The 7-Day Itch. Reba was exhausted. She had looked at 52 houses in 6 days. She had smelled mold that could melt paint. She had seen foundations that looked like a jigsaw puzzle after an earthquake. She had talked to neighbors who owned more shotguns than teeth. On the 7th day, she sat in the kitchen, defeated. "I got nothing, Van," she admitted when he walked in, looking smug. "Zilch, you were right. I'm cursed. I look at a house and I see the plumbing failing. I see the termites. I see the catastrophe. I don't have the stones." Van looked at her, and for a moment, the bravado dropped. He saw his mother-in-law, the woman who had held the family together through his own failures, and Cheyenne's struggles looking truly broken. "Well," Mrs. H. Van said softly, "it's a good thing I didn't wait for you." Reba looked up. "What?" "I bought a house." Reba's heart stopped. "You what?" "Without an inspection, without me seeing it." "I had to move fast," Van said, his chest puffing out. "There were 15 other offers. I took it as is. No risk. No reward. Right. That's what the flippers do. Van, as is in real estate, means this house is a portal to hell." Reba screamed. "You used our money, our future on a gamble." "I believe in us," Van said, though his voice wavered slightly. "I believe in your luck. You're like a 4-leaf clover with a temper. Tomorrow, we go see the verdict." Chapter 5. The Revelation in the Driveway. The house was a beige bungalow that looked like it was sighing under the weight of its own existence. Reba stood on the sidewalk, clutching her briefcase like a shield. "I can't do it, Vaughn," she whispered. "If we walk in there, and the inspector tells us the foundation is cracked, we lose everything. I'm not lucky. Every time something good happens, the other shoe drops, and usually, it's a heavy boot." Van walked over to her. He didn't look like the goofy kid who put forks in toasters anymore. He looked like a man who understood something Reba had forgotten. "Mrs. H., you think you're jinxed?" Van said. "But look at me. When my parents kicking me out, I found a home with you. When I got hurt, you helped me heal. When Cheyenne was struggling with the sauce, you were the one who kept the light on. Things don't get worse when you're around. They get better. You're not the jinx. You're the cure." Reba felt a tear prick her eye. "Van, that is the sweetest, most manipulative thing you have ever said." "I mean it. Now, do you want to back out? I'll take the hit. I'll let you off the hook right now before we hear the report." Reba looked at the house. She looked at Van. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of that old fire. "No, let's see what we bought." The inspector walked out of the front door, wiping his brow. He looked at them solemnly. "Well, the house is a dump." Van's face fell. Reba felt the world tilt. "Just kidding." The inspector grinned. "I love doing that. The house is solid. Roof is new, plumbing is copper, and the foundation is like a rock. You guys got a steal." Reba nearly collapsed with relief. "Van, we did it. We're flippers." As they celebrated, the inspector turned to Van. "Funny though, usually people don't pay for 2 inspections in 1 week." Reba froze. 2 inspections. The inspector nodded. "Yeah. Van had me out here last Tuesday before he put the offer in. He knew the house was perfect before he even showed it to you." Reba turned to Van, her eyes narrowing. You set me up. The whole lucky speech. The as-is gamble. You knew all along." Van shrugged, a slow, guilty smile spreading across his face. "I believe in you, Mrs. H., but I'm not an idiot. I'm a businessman." Chapter 6. The Shadow of 2 Names. Victory, Reba soon discovered, had a very specific scent. Stale cigarette smoke and wet dog. That was the primary olfactory profile of the steel Van had purchased. As they stood in the living room the following morning, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The walls were a shade of yellow that suggested the previous owners had been heavy smokers, or very confused about interior design. The carpet felt like it was alive, and not in a friendly Pixar movie kind of way. "Okay," Van Reba said, snapping a pair of yellow rubber gloves onto her hands. "We have the house. We have the luck. Now we need the labor. If we want to flip this before the bubble bursts, we need to be out of here in 30 days. 30 days, Van scoffed, waving a crowbar around like a scepter. "Mrs. H., I was a linebacker. I can move walls. I can move mountains. A little wallpaper isn't going to stop the Montgomery hot juggernaut." Suddenly, the front door creaked open, admitting a sliver of bright Texas sunshine and a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced smugness and expensive teeth. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," the man said, his voice a smooth, oily drawl. If it isn't a dynamic duo, and by dynamic, I mean desperate. Reba's spine stiffened. David's, did you run out of other people's listings to exploit? David stepped into the room, his Italian leather loafers clicking ominously on the hardwood floor that was currently covered in grime. He looked around with an expression of performative pity. I heard you two actually bought this lemon. I'm here as a friend. Reba. A mentor, if you will. I'd rather take advice from a bag of hammers, Reba snapped. I'm serious, David said, leaning against a doorframe that looked suspiciously like it had wood rot. This neighborhood is shifting. The froth is turning into a foam. I'll take this off your hands right now. Full price of what you paid. Plus $5,000 for your trouble. Consider it a failure insurance policy. Van stepped forward, the crowbar still in his hand. $5,000. You made 50 on the last one. Davy, 2 names. You think we're that stupid? David smiled, a slow, shark-like expression. I think you're out of your league. Real estate isn't about hard, Reba. It's about cold, hard numbers. And these numbers, they don't look good for you. You've got 30 days before the interest on that bridge loan starts eating your soul. See you at the auction. He turned and strolled out, the sound of his Porsche idling in the driveway serving as a final insult. Reba looked at Van. The silence in the dusty room was heavy. He's right about one thing, she whispered. The clock is ticking. Chapter 7. The Hammer of Justice. The first week of renovation was a descent into a specific kind of hell. Reba, Van, and a very reluctant Cheyenne were the primary labor force. Van's approach to demolition was enthusiastic but unguided. He had managed to take down an unload-bearing wall in 20 minutes, but he had also accidentally severed a waterline that flooded the kitchen. It's a water feature, Van shouted as he tried to plug the leak with his thumb. It adds value. It's organic. Reba was currently balanced on a ladder, scraping 3 decades of popcorn sealing off with a spatula. Van, if you call one more disaster organic, I am going to bury you in the backyard and tell the police you were a natural fertilizer. Cheyenne was in the corner, wearing a designer face mask and gingerly painting a baseboard. I don't see why we can't just hire people. Mom, this is ruining my manicure. And the smell. I think I'm developing a permanent allergy to 1982. We can't hire people, because we spent all the money on the down payment and the as-is closing costs. Reba grunted, a flake of ceiling landing in her hair. Sweat equity. Cheyenne, that's what flips are made of. As the sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows through the bare windows, Brock pulled up in his SUV. He looked tired, but he was carrying several bags of fast food, the universal olive branch of the Hart family. I brought sustenance, Brock announced, stepping over a pile of discarded drywall. And news. Is the news that you've decided to pay for a contractor? Reba asked hopefully. No. The news is that Barbara Jean has decided she is a visionary designer, Brock said with a sigh. She's been watching She has a mood board. And Reba, it involves a lot of turquoise. Reba closed her eyes. Lord, give me the stones to survive this. Chapter 8. The Turquoise Temptation. Barbara Jean arrived the next morning like a whirlwind of ruffles and enthusiasm. She was carrying a stack of magazines and a paint fan that was 90% neon. Reba, honey, I have it, she squealed, hugging Reba and leaving a faint scent of lavender and desperation on her work shirt. The friendly, Texas aesthetic. We're going to make this house feel like a warm hug from a neighbor you actually like. Barbara Jean, Reba said slowly, trying to maintain her sanity. This is a flip. It needs to be neutral. Grays, whites. Maybe a green if we're feeling spicy. We want people to see themselves here, not a hug from a stranger. Oh, Reba, you're so cynical, Barbara Jean said, spreading her magazines across a dusty countertop. Look at this. Bohoshi questions in. It's the next big thing. We need a feature wall in the living room. Something that says, I have a personality, and I'm not afraid to use it. Van walked in, covered in sawdust. I like bold. Bold is good. Is it as bold as putting a fork in a toaster? It's bolder, Van, Barbara Jean cried. It's turquoise dream. For the next 4 hours, Reba fought a losing battle against the turquoise tide. Every time she turned her back, Barbara Jean was pitching a whimsical light fixture or a tile pattern that looked like a kaleidoscope had an accident. But as Reba watched Barbara Jean work, watched the way she genuinely cared about making the space beautiful, she realized something. Barbara Jean wasn't just trying to design a house. She was trying to design a place where she belonged. Okay, Reba said, finally putting down her scraper. One feature wall. In the small bedroom. If the buyers hate it, we can paint over it in an hour. Barbara Jean's face lit up like a Christmas tree. You won't regret this. It's going to be a masterpiece. As Barbara Jean skipped off to the hardware store, Reba looked at Van. We're going to lose so much money, aren't we? Van put an arm around her, his dusty shoulder rubbing against hers. Maybe. But hey, at least we'll have stones. Turquoise ones. Chapter 9. By the middle of the second week, the steel house had been stripped to its bones. The turquoise feature wall was done, looking like a neon bruise in the middle of a beige room, but Barbara Jean was delighted. Reba, on the other hand, was calculating the cost of a bucket of white primer. It's about the journey, Mrs. H. Van said, his face smeared with soot. He had spent the morning in the crawl space trying to figure out why the guest bathroom smelled like low tide. The journey is currently costing us $500 a day in interest, and I'm pretty sure Cheyenne just threw her wedding ring into the dumpster by accident, Reba replied, pointing to her daughter who was currently waist-deep in construction debris. I found it, Cheyenne shrieked, emerging with a coffee-stained hand clutching a diamond and a vintage soda bottle. Maybe we can sell this on eBay. Every little bit helps, Reba muttered. As they worked, a strange peace settled over the house. For the first time in years, the family was pulled together by a common goal. They weren't just fixing a house. They were building a bridge over the wreckage of the last decade. Brock stopped by more often, offering dental advice that was actually just an excuse to bring more tacos. Even Barbara Jean seemed less manic, her ruffles traded for a pair of denim overalls that she wore with a surprising amount of grace. You know, Barbara Jean said, sitting on the floor of what would be the new kitchen, I used to think that being happy was about having everything perfect. But this place, it's a mess, and I've never felt more alive. Reba looked at her. That's the adrenaline, Barbara Jean, or the fumes from the floor stripper. Either way, enjoy it while it lasts. But as Reba turned back to the window she was sanding, she found herself smiling. Maybe Van was right. Maybe the froth on the market wasn't a bubble about to burst, but a wave they could finally learn to ride. Chapter 10. The Neighbor from Hell. Just as things were looking up, the universe reminded Reba that her luck was rarely a straight line. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, and a woman who looked like she had been carved out of a very expensive piece of granite stepped out. She marched up the driveway, her heels clicking like gunshots. I am Mrs. Gable, the woman announced, not bothering with a greeting. And I am the president of the Homeowners Association for this block, which, I might add, does not allow unauthorized structural modifications or visual disturbances like that thing. She pointed to the turquoise wall, which was visible through the uncurtained glass. It's a feature wall, Barbara Jean piped up, appearing behind Reba. It's a violation, Mrs. Gable snapped, and I have it on good authority from a very reputable real estate agent, a Mr. David Devidstat. You are operating without a commercial flipping license. Reba's blood ran cold. David Davids told you that. He was very concerned about the integrity of the neighborhood, Mrs. Gable said, handing Reba a thick envelope. This is you have 48 hours to provide proof of all permits and licenses, or the city will red tag this property, and believe me. She turned and marched back to her car, leaving Reba standing in the dust of her own ambition. He's trying to freeze us out, Reba whispered. He knows we can't afford a delay. If the city shuts us down, the bank pulls the loan. We lose the house, the money, and Van's credit. Van walked out, his linebacker shoulders sagging. What do we do, Mrs. H? Reba looked at the turquoise wall, then at her family. The fire in her red hair seemed to catch her. We do what hearts always do. Van, we fight. Cheyenne, get me the phone. Barbara Jean, get me a gallon of greige paint. We're going to give Mrs. Gable a neighborhood she'll never forget. Chapter 11. The Midnight Paint Job. The next 48 hours were a blur of caffeine and desperation. Reba spent the day at the city permit office, navigating a labyrinth of red tape that David Davids had clearly greased with a few well-placed donations. Meanwhile, back at the house, Van and Brock were performing a miracle of plumbing and electrical work. They weren't professionals, but they had stones and a YouTube tutorial for everything. If this wire touches this pipe, does the house explode? Brock asked, holding a pair of pliers. Only if you're thinking negative thoughts. Doc, Van shouted from the other room. Positive vibes only. When the sun went down, the real work began. They couldn't let Mrs. Gable see the turquoise wall through the window, but they didn't want to lose Barbara Jean's masterpiece just yet. We're going to build a false wall, Reba commanded. A thin sheet of drywall, painted the most boring shade of taupe known to man. We place it 6 inches in front of the turquoise wall. To the HOA, it looks neutral. To us, the dream stays alive. They worked through the night, lit by work lamps and fueled by the sheer spite of David's sabotage. By 4 a.m., the house looked like a modeled home, sterile, safe, and utterly unaffected. As they sat on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold that made Barbara Jean's turquoise look subtle by comparison, a sense of grim triumph settled over them. We did it, Cheyenne whispered, leaning her head on Van's shoulder. We're not done yet, Reba said, her eyes fixed on the road. Mrs. Gable will be here at 8, and I'm going to have the coffee ready. Chapter 12. The Storm. 8 o'clock came with the sound of a luxury car engine. Mrs. Gable arrived, flanked by a man in a city inspector's uniform. Reba stood on the porch, wearing her best, "I'm a professional and I haven't slept in 3 days" smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable. Inspector, would you like a tour?" They walked through the house, the inspector checking permits with a meticulousness that suggested he had been told to find something wrong. But thanks to Reba's marathon at the city office, every T was crossed and every I was dotted. Mrs. Gable stood in the bedroom, staring at the false wall. "It's very neutral. It's what the market demands," Reba said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Well," the inspector said, shutting his clipboard, "everything seems to be in order. No violations here." Mrs. Gable looked disappointed, but she couldn't argue with the paperwork. As they left, Reba leaned against the doorframe, her legs finally giving out. "We won," Van cheered, lifting Reba into a bear hug. But as the afternoon progressed, the sky turned a bruised purple. A classic Texas thunderstorm was brewing, the kind that turned streets into rivers and tested every shingle on a roof. Van, Reba said, looking up at a dark spot on the ceiling. "Did you finish the flashing on the chimney?" Van's face went pale. "I was going to do that today, before the HOA lady arrived." A loud crack of thunder shook the house, and a single drop of water fell from the ceiling, landing right in the middle of the neutral taupe false wall. "Oh, no," Barbara Jean whispered. "The dream is getting wet." The sky opened up, and the steel house began to reveal its final, most devastating secret. It wasn't just a fix, it was a sieve. Epilogue. The satellites goodbye. In the garage, Brock sat in the driver's seat of the SUV. He had found Barbara Jean's secret. He had listened to the tail end of her conversation with her. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. Instead, he opened the door and pulled her into a hug. "I'm sorry, BJ. I haven't been paying attention. I'll go to the opera. I'll go to the ballet. I'll even stop and ask for directions." As they walked into the house, the car remained silent. Then, the Iconostar light flickered. "Hello, can someone help me?" a voice cried out. It was Brock. He had accidentally locked the doors from the outside while the security system was engaged. "Iconostar, this is Chrissy," a new, female voice answered. "How can I help you?" "I'm locked in. Get me out of here." "Are you the guy who gave Hal a hard time?" Chrissy asked, her voice cold. "No, Brock Lee." "Liar," Chrissy said, and the line went dead. In the end, everyone got what they deserved. Reba had her house. Van had his victory. And Brock was learning that, in a world of satellites and cell phones, you could never really hide from the truth. The Heart of a Survivor. A novel based on the life of Reba Hart. Chapter 1. The Barbecue of Despair. The Houston sun was an oppressive weight, a humid blanket that smelled of charcoal, lighter fluid, and the faint, sweet scent of blooming jasmine. Reba Hart stood on her back porch, her hand shielded against the glare as she watched her ex-husband, Brock, flip a burger with a kind of practiced enthusiasm usually reserved for heart surgery. This was the 15th barbecue of the season, or maybe it just felt like it. In the world of the Harts, the lines between family time and organized chaos had long since blurred into a smear of suburban domesticity that Reba sometimes found harder to navigate than her divorce. "I found you a man, Reba," Barbara Jean's voice chirped from the picnic table, cutting through the sizzle of meat. Barbara Jean, the woman who had replaced Reba as Brock's wife, was currently wearing a sun hat the size of a satellite dish and a smile that was dangerously sincere. Reba didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She could picture the exact shade of lipstick Barbara Jean was wearing. Barbara Jean, if this is another one of your fixer-uppers, I'm going to need you to reconsider our friendship. And by reconsider, I mean end it. Oh, he's lovely, Barbara Jean insisted, fluttering a printout from a dating website. He's a widower. He loves cats, and he's a professional spoon player. He's 80, Barbara Jean Reba said, finally turning around. He was barbecuing for the 15th time when I saw him last. I'm not dating your grandpa. You missed the boat anyway, Barbara Jean sighed, her face falling into a tragic mask. He ran off with his day nurse. Well, not so much ran as shuffled. But the point is, Reba, you're stagnating. Your romantic life is a desert, and I am the irrigation system. Reba rolled her eyes, her gaze drifting to her daughter, Cheyenne, who was currently trying to convince her husband, Van, that a latte was a sensible investment. Dating is when two people who like each other go out in public, Cheyenne explained to Van, as if she were teaching a golden retriever how to do long division. And they're called a latte because they cost a lot. Van, keep up. Van nodded solemnly, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Right, latte cost a la. Got it. Hey, Mrs. H, when you asked me to watch Elizabeth while I went to the store to get her some orange juice, I didn't think you meant in Florida. Reba blinked. Van, the store is 3 blocks away. How did Florida enter the conversation? Sorry I took so long, Van said, ignoring the question of geography as he finally walked up the porch steps. But I couldn't remember which kind Elizabeth likes, pulp or no pulp, so I had to call Cheyenne, who needed a ride home from the library. Yeah, so he picked me up, Cheyenne added, and since both of us were hungry, we decided to go to lunch. It was a bonding experience. Mom. Reba looked at the two of them. They were young, beautiful, and completely incapable of functioning without her as the central axis of their world. So, where's the juice? Van's eyes went wide. Shoo! Can you watch Elizabeth while I run to the store to get the juice? Reba felt a dull throb start behind her left eye. It was the kind of headache that didn't just hurt. It whispered suggestions about running away to a cabin in the woods where no one knew the word mom. Oh, Van added, sensing her aura darkening. You might want to get some aspirin for yourself. You look a little twitchy. Chapter 2. The Digital Why do I need aspirin? Reba muttered to the empty kitchen 10 minutes later. She was elbow deep in dishwater, the sound of the television in the other room providing a frantic soundtrack to her life. Guys, will you please tell Miss 19th Century here that online dating is a great way to meet compatible men? Barbara Jean's voice drifted in from the living room, where she had cornered Cheyenne and Van. Reba dried her hands on a dish towel and walked into the lion's den. If the computer picks a man for me based on my interests, the only result is going to be a man who wants to be left alone in a quiet room with a glass of wine and a do not disturb sign on the door. At least take a look, Cheyenne pleaded, holding her laptop like a sacred relic. I mean, one of these guys could be your soulmate. Look at Steve. He's a mortician. He's stable. People are literally dying to see him. Or, Greg Van suggested, pointing at the screen. He's a prison guard. He knows how to handle tough crowds. That's a plus in this house. Or Jorge, Barbara Jean added, her eyes sparkling. He works at the zoo. Oh, that guy's a keeper. A zookeeper. Get it? Okay, yeah, Reba snapped, her patience finally fraying like an old rope. You know, maybe you should date him, Mom. It might put you in a better mood. Reba froze. It was Jake, her youngest, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk that was far too sophisticated for a boy his age. I've been a little cranky lately, Mrs. H, Van whispered, backing away slowly. Don't hit me. Reba sighed, the fight draining out of her. Did any of you ever stop to think that I wouldn't be so cranky if I didn't have 5 loads of laundry, a babysitting job, and a mountain of dishes to wash? I am a single mom who works too hard, who loves her kids, and never stops. But even a survivor needs a minute to breathe. There was a rare moment of silence. Even Barbara Jean looked chastened. Okay, look, Cheyenne said softly. I can do the dishes. Van can do everything else. I can, Van asked. Yes, you can, Cheyenne hissed. It's a little housework compared to Mom finding her soulmate. Reba looked at them, her family, her beautiful, chaotic, exhausting family. She looked at the laptop screen, where a man named Ted was smiling a generic, digital smile. "I do need something," Reba admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. "See," Barbara Jean cheered. "And I know what it is. Starts with an L, ends in an E, has an O, an AV, rhymes with dove." "Laundry," Van guessed. "Love!" Barbara Jean screamed. Reba ignored them, her mind already spinning. She didn't want love. She wanted the one thing that was rarer than a perfect match in the city of Houston. She wanted silence. "Fine," Reba said, a plan forming in the back of her mind. "I'll go on the date, but if he's a crazy person, I'm billing you for the therapy." Chapter 3. The Art of the Disappearing Act. The date was set for Tuesday night. To the rest of the world, or at least the world within the four walls of the heart, Residence Reba was preparing for a romantic encounter with a mystery man from the internet. She spent an hour in the bathroom, the shower running, the scent of expensive perfume wafting under the door. In reality, Reba was sitting on the edge of the bathtub, reading a paperback thriller and eating a sleeve of crackers